This is chapter 2.7. So now this is just kind of going off of last section. Last section was rates and ratios, and now we are getting into solving proportions. And so the objective of this is to solve and apply proportions. So we will explain to you what a proportion is right on the next slide. Okay. You will want to copy everything down. So take a second, pause the video if you need to, and copy all of that down. What a proportion is basically a relationship that has two ratios equal to each other. So if you think of a ratio as one number compared to another number using division, so like this, that's a ratio right there. A proportion is when you take two ratios and you set them equal to each other. Okay. Something about that is that B cannot be 0 and D, basically the denominators cannot be 0. And we read this like A is to B as C is to D. Okay. And hopefully that phrase right there will make a little bit more sense as we go along. But keep it kind of in the back of your head. A is to B as C is to D. So there are a couple of different ways of solving proportions. You've already done this, and you haven't really looked at it like a proportion. You've just looked at it as an equation that has fractions in it, and you've done it. So we're going to show you the first way, the one that you're probably most comfortable with, and that's using what's called the multiplication property. So if I told you right here you have to get m all by itself, what would you do? Well, right now m is being divided by 12, so the inverse of division is multiplying by 12. So we're going to multiply by 12. And if we multiply one side, we have to multiply the other. So now these 12s cancel out, and you are just left with m. 12 times 7 is 84 over 8. And then 84 over 8 can be reduced. Let's see, does 8 go into both? No, it does not. I know 2 goes into both, so let's do 2 right away. It's 42 over 4. And then I also know 2 goes into both of those, so that's 21 over 2. So you have 21 halves, or you can write it as 10.5, 10 and 1 half. I guess you could also write it as 10 and a half. Any of those are acceptable. And the thing about it is that it usually depends on what the situation is, on how you leave it. We're not going to get into that, the situations, but either of those are acceptable for me. So that's the multiplication rule. That's something that hopefully you're pretty familiar with. We're going to do one more just to make sure. So I'm going to rewrite that down here. Rewrote that horribly. So according to the multiplication rule, we would multiply by 7 first on both sides. That cancels the 7. We are left with 28 over 5, which you could leave it like that. That's all the way reduced. You could put it as a mixed number, so that'd be 5 and 3/5, or you can even write 5.6. And one quick thing about this is, what if these were flipped? If this was your original equation, you are allowed to take the inverse of both sides. And so you are allowed to flip this and go x over 7 equals 4 over 5. Okay? Now, usually I suggest that if it's in this form, I always like the next method, which is called the cross product. Okay? Take a second, pause this, write this entire thing down. The cross products of proportions are equal. Okay, so that's what this property says, is that the cross products are equal to each other. What it looks like is, if this is your proportion, starting off, if you multiply across, which is why it's called the cross product. If you take A times D, right here, it will equal B times C, which is right here. Okay? And again, here's an example of it in using actual numbers. 3 times 12 is 36 equals 4 times 9, which is also 36. Now, go back a couple of slides and think about what that said. What this means is that 3 is to 4 the same as 9 is to 12. Okay? For instance, let's say that if you wanted to buy 4 cookies, you had $3, you would be able to buy 4 cookies down in the lunchroom. I'm not sure if that's the correct price. I actually don't think it is. But if you had $3, you would be able to buy 4 cookies. That's equal to, if you had $9, you would be able to buy 12 cookies. Now, what we mean by equal is they're proportional. It means that the ratios are the same. It means that 9 over 12 reduces to 3 over 4. So it's the same ratio of money, which was the 3, to cookies, which was the 4. So let's check this out in action. So we're going to do this one. We are going to use the cross product property. So you multiply straight across. 4 times x is 4x. 3 times 8 is 24. And then it's simply solving. To get x all by itself, you divide by 4. X equals 6. Try another one. Cross multiply. Y times 5 is 5y. 3 times 3 is 9. Divide by 5. 5's cancel. You have y equals 9/5. Now, what if in the numerator or denominator, this could be what the denominator would look like too, like b minus 8. What if the numerator or denominator has more than just a variable or more than just one number? Okay. What if it's that's something like you see here? Nothing changes. You are still just multiplying across. So we now have 4 times b minus 8. That's this first one. And again, it doesn't matter which way you go first, just so you know that. Equals 5 times b plus 3. And now we distribute. So 4 times b is 4b. 4 times negative 8 is negative 32. 5 times b is 5b. 5 times 3 is 15. And now we have to solve. I'm going to leave the 5b over here, so I'm going to subtract 4b from both sides. We are left with negative 32 over here equals 1b, right? 5 minus 4 is 1b plus 15. Now I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. Remember, if it's 1b, you don't have to write the 1, so it's just b equals negative 32 minus 15 is negative 47. Okay. Let's try another one. Again, cross multiply. So we go n times 6, that's relatively easy, that's 6n, equals 5 times the entire numerator up there, 2n plus 4. Distribute, 5 times 2n is 10n, plus 5 times 4 is 20. Now, I'm going to do a little something different. If I move the 6 over here, I'm going to have to move the 20 over. That's 2 steps. So I would rather just move the 10. I know that now means we're going to be dealing with negatives, but that's fine. 6 minus 10 is negative 4n equals 20. Divide by negative 4. Those cancel. 20 divided by negative 4 is negative 5. So really not that much more difficult when you end up dealing with negatives. Just don't forget the negative. That's usually what gets most people in trouble. And so let's set up an equation for this. A portable media player has 2 gigabytes of storage and can hold about 500 songs. A similar but larger media player has 80 gigabytes of storage. About how many songs can the larger media player hold? So what we're looking at is trying to set up 2 ratios. So remember, a ratio is just comparing one thing to another using division. So what are we comparing? Well, we are comparing basically space to the number of songs. And we could flip this, we could say songs to space, it doesn't matter. So the first one at space is 2 gigabytes over 500 songs. Well, we are going to set this equal to another media player that has 80 gigabytes, but we don't know how many songs. So I'm going to use, I don't want that. It's too much like a 5. We're just going to stick to good old x. Okay? Now, you don't always have to write these labels in, but don't forget them either. Okay, you don't want to forget what you're dealing with. So, cross multiply. 2 times x. 2x. 500 times 80. 40,000. Divide by 2. These cancel. X equals 20,000. And now is where you have to remember 20,000 what? 20,000 songs. And that is your video. Okay? If you would like a few more as practice, you can go ahead and give these a shot. Pause the video. Okay? If you did want those as practice, I'll try to get you your answers real quick. So this one would turn out to be B equals 24/5. This one would turn out to be, let me grab a calculator real quick. X equals 27. This one would turn out to be W equals 3. And this one would turn out to be x equals 5. All right, that's the end of the video.